Welcome to the Blue Fire Podcast. I'm Mary Gandy, based out of Tucson, Arizona, and I am the founder and coach of Blue Fire. This is our 5th podcast. This is so exciting. Welcome. We're happy you are here. Thank you for joining us. And I want to invite you to listen to any of our previous podcasts on YouTube and Spotify. And please leave us a review. Send us questions that you have about the podcast or about coaching. We would love to chat with you.
And I'm Courtney. I'm based out of Long Beach, and I'm one of the other coaches. The other coach with Blue Fire. As kind of almost an update, not my personal update, but there were a couple cool races that have happened recently that I just wanted to mention. There was the Hard Rock 100, and that's a really challenging race over in Colorado. I was just having fun looking through the results, and I realized that there was not a single runner who was under the age of 30 at that race. And the winners of that race, the men's winner was 50 years old, and the women's winner was 41. That was Courtney Walter. But it was just another highlight to me how this long distance running sport tends to be, we peak later. And it was just another positive reminder of that. The other race that just happened too was Badwater 135. And so that's the race that goes from Badwater, which is in Death Valley, all the way up to Whitney Portal. So it's the lowest spot in the U.S. to the highest spot in the U.S. And they do it in the middle of July in Death Valley, so it's very hot. And so definitely helped inspire this podcast a little bit.
Yeah, and Courtney, you were talking about that, and so I was on YouTube and I saw this video come up for The Line, which is features 3 women in the 2025 Badwater 135, and that is, I highly recommend it. We'll have the link in our show notes. I highly recommend you check that out.
Yeah, I ended up watching it, and I think one of the women they follow, I think she was 18, or she was 18 when she ran it for the first time. I think she's ran it 3 times, which is just incredible.
It's amazing. Yeah. And even when we talk about looking at the winner of Hard Rock being in their 50s, right? And then just the range you have then to Badwater 135. And it's just so awesome. I love this sport. Yeah. And, also this time of year, I was thinking as you were talking about that too, how many races have been canceled right now because of fires. And our hearts just go out to people affected by the wildfires right now. We're both originally from Washington State, and there are a lot of fires up there and people affected in Spokane. And so, we're just feeling for everybody that is going through that. Courtney, life update. What's happening with you?
I'm interviewing for a job. I might finally get a job. This podcast has gotten to see that my journey through this job process for the first time. I just had a final interview with a company. So I'm just waiting to hear back. So fingers crossed. But I'm very excited. So if I get the job, maybe next podcast, I'll let you guys know. How about you, Mary?
Well, I look forward to hearing about that. I am currently teaching 6th grade, so in a middle school, and we go to it almost as a year-round school. So we've been in school for a little while now, and one week I said, I feel like I've run a marathon with sprint intervals every day. And parallels of ultra running have definitely been applied to teaching. So that part of my life is good, and I'm grateful. And also I was so excited this morning because I went for just a bit longer run than I've been on. I've had a little bit of an injury following my 50K I did in June. And so just trying to get healthy again. So I feel like I'm trending in the right direction. And speaking of June, that podcast or that race, Carly Graham was at that race with me, and she was also on our last podcast. And we just want to follow up and wish her a huge congratulations on finishing the Tahoe Rim 100K. And I looked up that, so it's 100K with, I believe, over 10,000 feet of climbing. So huge kudos to you, Carly. You are an inspiration. As we get into this podcast, we also want to share a little bit more about us, because we are going to talk today about heat and training in the heat, what happens to our bodies. We're in very warm temperature, how we can train and prepare if we have races in the heat. And so a little bit about us is that we are not doctors. We do not play doctors on TV or anywhere. But actually, I shouldn't say that, because technically Courtney is a doctor. Tell us a little bit about your PhD, Courtney.
Yeah, so I'm a doctor in physics, not a doctor in physical anything. And so I feel like that gives me a really strong background in being able to read research papers. It doesn't give me the expertise in the certain areas, but for prepping for this podcast, we did a lot of research and reading of different research papers on how the body is affected by the heat, especially for athletes. And so we wanted to share some of what we've read with you all. But a lot of these are recommendations. Being in extreme heat or doing really hard exercises can become dangerous in certain situations. So take all of this advice as a place to start off at. But when it comes down to it, it's really important that you listen to your own body and your own cues as you're out there, so you don't put yourself in a bad situation.
Definitely. We're going to kind of take a little bit of a deep dive into some of the science on it. But please, consult with your coach, consult with your doctor when you're thinking about running in the heat, doing exercise in the heat, and that sort of thing. And we also want to encourage you to hang on. If we get into talking about through some of the science, we want to encourage you to hang on through that. And we're going to get into some practical applications of what do we do? How do we take in food? How do we take in nutrition, electrolytes, those kinds of things? And also just how to best exist when we're training and racing in the heat. All right, Courtney, will you start us off here? We're going to talk about how our bodies regulate temperature. Will you share?
Yes. Yeah. I think the theme for this whole podcast is going to be the body in balance. When we do things to get your body out of balance, a lot of our efforts go into how do we bring our bodies back into balance. So thinking about temperature, your body naturally gives off heat. There's a lot of processes that are happening within your body. Your muscles are working. Your heart is pumping. You're breathing. Your body's converting food into energy. So many things happening in your body. And all of those things make heat. Your body wants to live at a very specific heat. So it's 97.7 degrees Fahrenheit or something like that. Your body wants to stay in that very specific temperature. So what it does is it has these cooling mechanisms to keep you at that exact temperature. The way it does this cooling is at your skin. So say we start off with the example of you are in a room temperature room or an AC room. The air around you is going to be colder than your body. And so what happens is the cold air touches your skin and it takes away some of that heat. So you're actually kind of warming up the air around you, and the air around you is cooling down your skin. And the way your body works with that is it takes your blood, it brings it up to the skin. And so with your skin cooling down, the blood cools down. And then the blood is then taken back put throughout your body and cools your body as a whole. So that's what happens when you're in like a room temperature room or a cold room or something like that. That doesn't work though when you're in the heat. When you're in the heat, there's not enough like temperature difference for your body to use that to cool down. So what happens then is we become evaporative cooling. So that's when we start to sweat. So our body turns on sweat and the water piles up on your skin. So when you have this water, this sweat building up on your skin, each like little molecule of water takes the heat from your skin and then jumps off into the air as steam. And so every time that water is turning into a gas or steam, it's taking a bunch of that energy with it, that heat, and it cools down your skin. So then if you're in this extreme environment, if you're in a hot environment, your body can still cool itself. You might end up in temperatures above your body temperature. Your body has to then also fight absorbing the heat. So heat always wants to go to wherever it's cooler. So if you are outside and it's like 120 degrees Fahrenheit, your body's going to try to accidentally absorb that heat. So your body has to work even harder to keep itself cool.
I'm picturing what is the cartoon with the science teacher and then they get on the school bus?
Oh, the magic school bus.
Magic school bus, right? I picture the magic school bus. So you're talking about the water droplets coming off. I'm like, oh wow, this would be so great. I'm in my mind. I'm in the magic school bus.
Oh, good.
Okay, so Courtney, what am I going to feel? I mean,
Yes.
I thank you. And the body is so amazing, and this balance that it's always trying to find. So what's it going to feel like for me when I step into the heat? Obviously, I know I'm going to feel hot.
Yeah, practically we know what it feels like, but what's actually happening there?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the big things is how much blood is being taken to your skin. Again, your body is really good at figuring out exactly what temperature to be at, which means it knows exactly how much blood it needs to cool to stay at that temperature. So if you're in a really hot environment and it needs to cool down really fast, then it's going to put even more blood at your skin's surface to help cool yourself down. This is great. This is why you kind of look flushed and red. Your blood's coming up to the surface. It's like filling up all these like little blood vessels. But what this also means is that your blood is focused at your skin's surface and it's being taken away from other places. So you're essentially just going to have less blood in the center of your body almost. Not in any way that's going to cause you like distress, but in ways that it's going to make things work a little differently. For example, if your blood is focused on your skin, it's not going to be as focused on your muscles. So your muscles might feel a little weaker. If it's focused on your skin, there's just less volume going through your heart. That means that every time your heart is beating, it's just pumping a little less blood volume through. So to maintain the circulation that it needs, your heart rate is actually going to increase. So it's increasing because it wants the same blood flow. There's less blood to flow through, so it needs to pump a little bit faster. So you're going to have an increased heart rate. Again, we have sweat. So it takes a moment for your body to turn on sweat. So when you go right outside, like your body's doing the cooling through just the air. But when your body realizes it needs more cooling, then it turns on the sweat. So there's a bit of a delayed response in that. So that's why warming up can really help you, like warming up in a workout, because you need to take that time for your body to get ready to be balanced, because it takes a moment for your body to find balance.
Mm-hmm. I love that about the heart rate because I experienced that a lot. Living in Tucson, it's very hot. It's August right now. Most days are 100 degrees. If I just go out and were to start a workout, And especially when it first starts to get warm in the season, I really notice that all of a sudden now my heart rate is up so much faster, especially at the beginning of the workout. If I'm not warmed up, if I don't walk or something at the beginning, that the heart rate is definitely picking up and I'm noticing a difference. So what I'm hearing you saying is that our body is kind of pushing blood into different areas and using it for different purposes. And so if we have less blood pumped out with each one, then our heart rate is going to pick up. That makes a lot of sense. It makes me think of the heart almost being like an engine, and now it's like, okay, I've got to shift gears, so to speak, so that that blood can get to where it needs to go, so that we can keep functioning.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it's doing. And the other thing I didn't mention too with like the blood flow is, we sometimes think about this too with running. When we're running, our blood's focused on our muscles and focused on other areas. And so it might not be as focused on your digestive system, which is sometimes why, eating can not feel as great. There's a lot of things that go into eating that can cause it to feel good or not good, including like what you're eating and that sort of thing. But one of the things is how much effort your body's putting into it. If your body's focused on movement and it's focused on cooling it down, it's not focused on digestion. And so that process is also going to slow down.
Uh-huh. Okay, Courtney. So as I'm going out for my workout, whether it's a run or a hike or riding my bike in the heat, what are some things that are physically going on as far as the workout?
Yeah. So like in terms of like we mentioned your body's kind of switching gears.
Mm-hmm.
This comes out in how your body is actually performing. If we take a like controlled example of, say you're on a spin bike and you have a specific power output that you are doing on your spin bike. You can read it out. We know the temperature of the room, that sort of thing. You'll find, say you're in a room that's like 60 degrees Fahrenheit. It's nice and pretty cool. You're feeling very comfortable, and you have your power output. If we change the temperature of that room to say like 90 degrees and we maintain that same power output, you'll find that the your heart rate, of course, like we said, is going to go up, but the effort you feel is going to go up. So even though your body is putting out the same effort, our same power output for the bike, it's going to feel harder. And that's because your body is genuinely working harder to maintain that same level of output. And this is one of the important things about trail running, that we really encourage people to use your perceived effort. It's because the different conditions are going to change how your body is like putting out that effort. One of the things I wanted to note with this is this increase in effort you can actually see within measurements of your body. So if you're familiar with your VO2 max, we can probably get into more in another podcast, but as a general overview, it's essentially how efficient your body is at using oxygen to fuel your body, to power your body. Your VO2 max actually goes down when you're in the heat. And that again is connected to how your blood is flowing through your body. One of the other things that we can look at is your lactate threshold. So your lactate is connected to how your body and how your muscles convert fuel into energy. And lactate threshold is connected to the limit that your body can do that conversion, essentially. I won't go into the science there. There's connections to the anaerobic versus aerobic processes and stuff. But it's essentially kind of the upper limit that your body can sustain a certain energy output. So in experiments, they found that this lactate threshold pace does in fact become a slower pace when you're in the heat. So again, this is connected to this idea that running in the heat is harder. It just feels harder. It is harder. So it's really important to take a moment to realign your expectations for yourself, because it's not helpful to get frustrated that you're not performing in the same way when you did when it was cool down, because that's just not what your body is made to do. There's things that we'll talk about on how to be the best version of your body in the heat, but there's always going to be a little bit of that limiting factor. And so have a little grace with your body when you're dealing with the heat.
Absolutely. I think, and it can be really easy to say we train in a certain environment and we can get used to maybe certain paces that maybe what our zone two is a certain pace. And it's something to think about if you're racing, if you don't train in the heat necessarily, and then you're going to a warmer environment to race, you really have to think that your body really hasn't had the time to acclimate. And so even if you've done the acclimation, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. You're still gonna have to listen to your body. You're gonna have to listen to your perceived exertion and adjust that some of those paces might be a little bit different.
So getting into what actually like goes into heat acclimation. Mary, do you want to get us started on that one?
Yes. So when we are acclimating, our body actually will get better at staying cool. It will sweat more, we'll lose less sodium. Our bodies, as Courtney was saying earlier, our bodies are trying to find this balance, and our bodies do a good job of being efficient. Our cardiovascular system gets more efficient. Our plasma volume expands, so more blood volume. Our heart rate, stroke volume, also how much blood is flowing with a heartbeat, that starts to increase. So then the heart rate can start going back down. And I have to say, I was up in Seattle for several weeks this summer and then came back to Tucson in the end of June. And it was so hot. And I remember going through this and then noticing a couple weeks later, because that's about how long it takes, that, oh, wow, I'm kind of regulating again to where I'm at. Our bodies get better at conserving the fluids that we have. Our thirst regulation gets better. We're less likely to experience dehydration, and our metabolism, our body's use of glycogen gets better. And also just our cells, as they become more resilient to the heat. So we're able to deal with that stress of the heat much better.
Which I thought was crazy that it goes all the way down to like the cellular level. Like it
Mhm.
makes sense to me that your body would adapt the blood volume, like that's a very straightforward thing. It just adds more volume. I actually don't know how that happens. It seems easy in my head. But like that seems like a really easy solution, add more volume. It can come more to the surface for blood, and then it can pump easier. But the fact that it goes to like the cellular level, it's really interesting.
I agree. And I think that also, for me, it helps me have that grace with myself about how long it's going to take. Our bodies, they are resilient, they will adapt, but it doesn't happen overnight. So in the first 3 days or 3 to 5 days, we have a lot of blood plasma volume change, and we'll see some of the heart rate dropping, and we'll feel things might start to feel a little easier, maybe especially on the longer side of that. And then towards the end of that first week and midway through that second week, we start to have cardiovascular sweating adaptations are now um, starting to regulate a little more. And that's most people, everyone's going to vary. So you really have to remember that and know yourself and how much are you affected by the heat. And some of that can depend on what phase in life you are, that how sensitive you are. I think now I'm in my early 50s. I think I'm more sensitive to heat than I was when I was younger. So maybe that might take me a little longer than the younger version of Mary.
Yeah, and I also found it really interesting that like most of the adaptations you get from heat training happen in the first week.
Mhm.
Like after that, you are still getting benefits and it's going to slowly adapt. Like if you only train in the heat, obviously you're going to adapt in a different way than if you adapt and you train for 2 weeks.
Mm.
But that it only takes a week to get a lot of this adaptation. I feel like that makes it feel a little bit more accessible. You don't have to just live in a hot climate to make this happen for yourself. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't think most people have the flexibility. Some people do, and that's fabulous to if say they're going to be in an event that's in the heat to actually go spend 2 weeks there before. But if you can, awesome, because then you can really experience, you know, specifically what the heat is like in that place physically in the heat.
This reminds me, it's very similar to elevation acclimation.
Hmm.
And it reminds me how, it takes, like we were saying, it takes 3 to 5 days to start to feel some of that adaptation. That means that the first couple days, for day 1, day 2, day 3, you're you might feel worse
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
all you're doing is putting yourself in a more a situation that's more stressful on your body, and you're performing an exercise. And then if you do that for a couple days, that added stressor might take its toll. You might feel even worse before the adaptation happens. So it's important to like be consistent and follow it through for a week or so. But I think that goes towards like um my personal experience with acclimating to like elevation, where there is this sweet spot of if you show up the day of your race, you are going to feel better than if you show up 2 days before your race. And that's because you're putting your body in this stressful situation for a couple days where you're dealing with the stressors without yet having received the acclimation. And
Hmm.
so, that's something that you figure out for yourself going into a race or that sort of thing. Something you work with a coach on or do some Googling what works best for your schedule and yourself. But it's definitely something to think of that first few days where you're adding a stressor to your body versus not yet getting that adaptation.
Hmm. Definitely. What I pictured in my mind was, especially when I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and we would have all of a sudden the temperatures would pick up and we'd have some really hot days, and how exhausted a lot of people feel, especially that first hot day, because our body's getting hit by all this heat and it's trying to make those adaptations. So maybe those first couple of days are really, really tiring because, yeah, our body is processing all of this. Um, okay, and then as far as, what happens? What if my race gets canceled or something like that, or I can't hit my heat training one day? Am I going to lose it? What's going on there, Courtney?
So the adaptations stick around a little bit longer than it took to get them, which is nice. Um, about 1 week not running in the heat, you're still going to have most of the adaptations that you got. About 2 weeks, you're going to start to have some of those adaptations start to decline. And then about 3 weeks, you're going to lose a majority of the adaptations you worked for. I think in general, once you have gone through that adaptation process, one of the papers that we used as a resource for this claimed that reacclimation happens a lot faster the second time. And so that's something exciting to consider, that all this work you've done, if you lose it, it's a little bit easier to gain it back.
Awesome. And by the way, we will have all of our sources for our papers. So if you want to read any of those, or they're not our papers, but the papers that we used as sources, you certainly can check those out in our show notes. Let's get to some practical advice. I'm the person that fast forwards through everything until the part that says to show me what to do.
We,
So
we can
let's
put a timestamp on it for anyone who wants to skip forward to this part.
right. Some practical advice. So as we said, it takes about 2 weeks. So start heat training 10 to 14 days before your event if you can. So we think about that too. Um, in training for an event, sometimes I have thought in the past, oh, I have to do a lot of time training in this specificity. As we get closer to events, we start doing more specific training, whether that's for altitude or climbing or whatever it is. But this specific thing really isn't as long if you think about it. So about 2 weeks out, even if you're short on time, even a week out. Try to get 60 to 100 minutes of exercise in the heat each day to have that heat stimulus. So that might look like maybe, if you can run inside on a treadmill or something like that, if you don't have excess, if your outdoor heat doesn't provide that for you, or maybe you adjust your training time where usually you're running in the morning. Well, now you're going to run later in the day to try to get some of that heat training in. Um, our research has shown, though, that exercise in the heat is the gold standard for having this acclimation take place. And I think that makes so much sense, too, because even if you think about all the little things you do, like getting into your pack and getting to your water and what your clothes feel like, it's not just the physiological thing that happens, but it's actually putting yourself in the whole picture of what it is like to be in the heat. For me, that really makes a lot of sense. What do you think, Courtney?
Yeah, I agree. Because also your body, like we'll talk a little bit more about hydration and electrolytes in a minute, but you're going to be approaching that a little bit different than your normal training when you're in the heat. And so it's like beyond just the adaptations, just getting used to how much you need to drink and how many electrolytes you need to have. It's good to test those out before race day.
Excellent. Yes, practice, practice, practice. That is so important. Okay, so a couple other of those adaptations. So if you just don't have access, you can't work out in the heat or in a condition that is warm enough, that would really bring about those adaptations. Things you can do if you have access to a sauna. I was reading an article on the Badwater website. If you're getting ready for Badwater, this isn't really the podcast for that We're excited for you. We wish you all the best. but um, but this is the source that I found that on. I thought it was really interesting. They have some great resources there about heat training. But they recommend doing a dry sauna after your workout. So you're going to go do your workout. Now, physiologically, your body is going to be, have been very active for a little while. And then you go into that sauna. They recommend dry sauna, but if you only have a steam sauna, that's okay too. Another option is a hot shower following a run, or even a post-water immersion. I read one study about a hot water immersion following exercise and how that helped with adaptations. And one interesting thing too, and I appreciate so much that we have a lot more studies on women because our physiology is different. And so that particular study was done on men. So I am a little curious, how that is different for women. What are those variables on heat acclimation for women?
Yeah, which we don't know today.
I don't know today. I'm just putting it out there.
Yes.
So let's get into electrolytes and hydration. What are some changes that we might be making to our hydration, Courtney?
Yeah. So we talked in the beginning, the theme of this podcast is balance. We need to find out how to keep our body balanced with both water and electrolytes. Because we're sweating more, we're going to be losing our water faster. So we're going to need to replace that water. But same with the electrolytes. Salt is one of the important parts of sweating. Salt actually drives where water goes within your body. And so your body actually uses the salt to encourage water to come to the surface and causes the sweat. So when you're sweating, you're losing that salt, specifically the sodium. And so we need to figure out that equilibrium for your water and electrolyte losses. So again, this goes really important into practicing with yourself. Everyone's going to need a different amount of water and a different amount of electrolytes. So understanding maybe what's your normal baseline and increasing it a little bit. And that's a great place to start for figuring out where you need to be. I want to note that electrolytes are used for more than just where your water goes in your body. There are many electrolytes, but some of those include potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, and then of course sodium. So all of those electrolytes are doing different things within your body. Some of them are moving water. Some of them actually act as part of the signals going through your nerves. Some of them help your muscles make their contractions. So it's important to not just replace your sodium, but having the correct amounts of all of the different electrolytes. When you get an electrolyte supplement, oftentimes they'll have a mixture of all of these. I actually put together a little chart that shows the common breakdown for most of these popular supplements that we can share. But it's important to note, some of the supplements do not have all of the electrolytes available. I think like Liquid IV has sodium and one other one. Most of the sports ones will have all of the electrolytes you need. But again, because your body needs to be in balance, we want to figure out for yourself what is the correct amount of electrolytes you want to be taking. A great place to start is the recommended value on your electrolyte supplement. Oftentimes, the way it's written is, say it's like 1 scoop of your electrolytes in a certain amount of water. That is a great place to start. Use that, and then from there, we can go into what some of the symptoms will be for it not being the right balance and what your body will feel like out of balance. But if you think about your body in balance and our goal to be getting back into balance, I think that's a great mentality to approach it as. I personally tend towards more is better in my mind, and that is not how you should approach this. I used to drink so much water because that was something I had control over. And so in my head, drinking more water was the key to maximizing my performance because it was something really accessible. However, I had chronic headaches and I could not figure out what was going on with my body. And I remember actually asking, not Mary, different coach at the time, like, am I drinking too much water? And they were like, no, there's no way you're drinking too much water. Turns out I wasn't necessarily drinking too much water, but I was drinking too much water and not enough electrolytes. And so if you are just chugging water in the heat, what you're accidentally doing is furthering your imbalance of electrolytes. So if you're super thirsty when you're out for these hot runs, it is not a good choice to just chug a ton of water all at once. That can cause some very severe issues in the imbalance of your body. If you are so thirsty that you need to chug water in your race or in your run, make sure it's electrolyte water of the recommended balance. Oftentimes the recommended balance is connected to like the optimal way for your body to absorb it. And so if you're chugging a bunch of water with your electrolytes, you're not going to accidentally imbalance your body in the same way you would without the electrolytes. So just a really important idea that I hope you take away from this.
Yeah, Courtney, and I also want to just kind of a side note on that. Thank you for that point about more is not always better, because I think also one thing I'm starting to see now is that electrolytes are very popular. When you go to Costco, I don't know if I imagine Southern California, it's like this too, but here in Tucson, I mean, we have big electrolyte products all over the place, which is really important. People are working outside, they're sweating a lot. So they're in a similar situation where if they're just having water, they're not going to feel good, or it potentially could be dangerous. But at the same time, really knowing your own body, and I'm kind of talking about everyday life now, is that having high amounts of electrolytes, um, and say you're working inside, you're not out in the heat a lot, potentially could be unsafe for you as well. So again, we're not saying how much we think anybody needs, but we just want to say just to have caution on, swinging to one side or the other of a whole bunch of water or adding a whole bunch of electrolytes, because they're getting marketed towards everybody to have electrolytes, and that's not necessarily the case. But there are some times, I think, preparing, like say you're going into um, a really you have a long run in the heat, or you're getting ready for your race, there's some things that we can do as far as like pre-hydrating, maybe the day before or in the time before your activity, is having some electrolytes. And another thing is, it's so important to practice. I really work with my athletes that when we start working together, I want you focusing on nutrition and hydration and having that woven into all your workouts. So by the time you get to the race, it isn't a big math equation to try to figure out, because you've been figuring it out all the time. But some recommendations are that and like Courtney said, start with maybe the recommendation on whatever type of electrolyte that you use. So say you were going to have a long run, it's going to be a little bit warmer the night before. Follow those recommendations and have electrolytes the night before. Have some electrolytes before your workout, about 90 minutes before you start. Finish it in time to give your body time to absorb it. And also then you're going to have to go to the bathroom. So give yourself some practical time to take care of what you need to take care of before you head out on your run.
Yeah, it can be a really powerful tool, especially like, we're in a very hot climate and we're doing some very long runs. But to bring it back to the other side of things, if you're doing a 30-minute run at a very easy pace in a very temperate weather, you probably don't need electrolytes. Electrolytes just happen naturally in our diets. Okay, let me caveat. You do need electrolytes.
Yeah.
You probably don't need an electrolyte supplement. Electrolytes happen naturally in our foods. There's salts in our foods. I like to seek out fruit. Fruit has a ton of electrolytes in it. Coconut water has specifically high levels of potassium. Note that coconut water does not have sodium usually. So it's great electrolyte, but if you're losing a lot of sodium, then make sure you're being intentional about that. But for those shorter runs, your diet is probably sufficient for the electrolytes you need. And then the next time you eat, you have rebalanced your body. So that goes into like everyday life. But of course, there are extenuating circumstances for certain people. Some people are going to be more susceptible to an imbalance. Some people just need higher levels of electrolytes due to conditions. So again, that goes back to it depends on who you are. And so these are general recommendations and things for you to consider. But when it comes down to it, it needs to be a practice for you to figure out what you need.
Yeah. Thank you, Courtney. Let's get into a little bit of the condition you were talking about when we are basically having too much water and we're not supplementing back with electrolytes. It's called hyponatremia. And so this is a really important thing. It's important to be aware of that, we're practicing and taking the steps. And sometimes we could be in an event. We need to know what, if we start feeling dizzy, if we start feeling nauseous, we need to get some help to make sure that we are sorting through what's going on to make sure we're not heading in this direction. Courtney, can you share what are some of the symptoms of hyponatremia?
Yeah. So these would be symptoms like in the middle of the activity that are indicating that you have a strong imbalance. This is like something where you should be taking action on this. Some of these feelings will be a headache, nausea. If it's bad enough, you can start vomiting. A lot of it is within your brain. So you might start to feel dizziness, like disoriented. you're going to feel tired. You might start to feel some muscle cramps, some weakness. One of the interesting ones is like the swelling of your hands and feet and like an increase in body weight. And that actually goes towards, again, how these electrolytes are processing where the water is going in your body. And so if you're not taking in enough electrolytes, then water is going to flow to wherever those electrolytes still are in your body. So they're not flowing to your sweat anymore, but they're going to flow towards other parts of your body. And that's why your hands start to swell up, because it's flowing to the cells that still have salts. And then it actually flows towards your brain, which still has salts. And that's what can cause some of these issues. And if it's severe enough, you can have a coma, because again, it's connected to your brain. It can cause some really bad issues. These are very extreme examples. I think the ones I'm most familiar with are the headache and nausea. If I start to get a headache, for me, that's an indicator that I'm not taking in enough salt. And so that I'll be more intentional about increasing the salt during the activity.
Yeah, it's so important if you start to notice some of these symptoms. I several years ago when I was at Ironman and competing in an Ironman event, I was in the run section and I was careful to get in my sports nutrition, but it was a hot day and I was behind and I remember being the section of the road and I couldn't tell. I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if the road is going up or down. Am I going uphill or downhill right now? And then I thought, this is not a question I should be asking myself. And so they always had broth. A lot of races will have broth, even when it's warm out. And I knew that I needed some broth. I got the broth, and I think thankfully I wasn't, very far into being depleted. And so I was able to get back into the race. But don't try to tough it out. We're often known in these endurance events to try to tough it out through some really extreme things. But when it comes to our health, we have to take care of our bodies. We have to be able to race another day and train another day and live our lives. And so most races have a medical team somewhere out there. Lots of them have them at each aid station. So get into the aid station, just check in with somebody. It doesn't mean you're done, but check in so that someone that maybe has different perspective from you being right in there in the moment can help you mitigate. What do I need to try to do so that I can safely get back out on the race course?
Yeah. Yeah, and I also kind of associate some of these issues with the longer distance runs. So I would be most on top of like identifying these things in probably a 2-hour longer run. Below that, you're probably not going to have that severe of an imbalance with specifically your salts. The other thing you might consider, though, on the shorter term would be things like heat exhaustion. That's obviously a different beast altogether, but something to be aware of and consider so you don't put yourself in, again, a dangerous situation.
Yeah, and some of the symptoms are similar too, so it's hard. That's why it's nice to have someone help you talk through that so you can kind of figure out what's going on. Well, speaking of heat, let's talk about some things we can do to stay cool when we're out there. When I was getting ready for Javelina last year, I started using long sleeves and using SPF shirts, which I really wasn't a fan of. I like to wear a tank top, so I like to feel the air on my skin. But that also, as you know, as you were talking earlier, Courtney, about where all that heat goes when we have a lot of sun coming on our bodies, we are getting warmer and warmer and warmer as we absorb that. So having some of those SPF sleeves or long sleeve shirts, hats to help keep that sun off of our bodies is really, really important.
With that, the color of those things also matter. I would get a white one or a very light colored one. The darker colors absorb more heat from the sun, and so they're going to feel warmer on your body. I feel like I stay cooler both from the sun not actually touching my skin, but also the way they hold on to sweat. They're just damp and they feel a little cooler. And they
Yeah,
can also then be a vehicle for pouring water on yourself. Where if we're evaporative cooling, then if we can just add some other bonus water to our body, it's going to be a little bit easier to cool. So at the races, a lot of times they'll have like maybe ice or water that you can just pour on yourself. And do not be afraid to do the things you need to do to cool yourself down.
absolutely. I think that's so important. I'm going to keep that phrase bonus water. I really like that a lot. I'm going to ask for some bonus water at my next race. Can you put some bonus water on my body, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, also I think to practice, practice, practice. So figuring out what kind of, if you're going to do a long sleeve shirt or the sleeves, what you like. So that's what our long runs have many purposes. But one of those is just figuring out your gear and what do you want, a lighter, more flowy shirt, or what is just comfortable for you when you get into those uncomfortable, exhausted times. Same with hats. Like you got to wear a hat a little while to see how does it feel when I'm hot and sweaty and uncomfortable. I like lighter hats. You just have to figure out what you like. Ice bandanas. We were given ice bandanas last year at Javelina, and I love that ice bandana because it has a zipper on it. And so you can just fill that thing up with ice, zip it. But you can also make your own. So there's lots of options there. But that's probably my favorite. My go-to is the ice bandana. And then the other thing is just being tactical as you're out there. Even if you see shade and you think, oh, it's just a little bit of shade. But if you accumulate a bunch of little bits of shade, or you run the path that has no shade, it really does make a difference. Sometimes even it just mentally makes a difference that I'm not just being exposed to the heat for such a long time.
Yeah, one thing I learned on the PCT was that the temperatures that are like in the forecast, those are the temperatures in the shade. Because when you're exposed to the sun, it varies so much how hot you can get based off of a lot of different factors. So that's like the ambient hot temperature. And so if your temperature says it's like going to be 100 degrees out, when you're out there in the sun, the temperature on your skin might be hotter than 100 degrees. And so yeah, being in the shade makes a huge difference. And then also just being aware of that, which was a shock to me because I remember I just have this vivid memory of this one time where it was this incredibly hot section, and one of the people I was hiking with had a thermometer on their pack, and the thermometer read 120 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
And it was, I was like, oh, no wonder I feel like garbage. You know, I thought that was just me.
It's just hot out.
It's just
really
hot out.
Oh, well, we've talked a little bit about hydration while we're running, and pre-hydration. But then we think about our actual feeling and some things that we might be able to do when we're feeling, because sometimes when you're hot, the same food just does not go down as well. It isn't even necessarily how well it's settling in your stomach, but actually just eating it. So I think one thing is a lot of races now have watermelon. I notice when it's hot, it's like the watermelon is so good. Just trying to find some cooler things. Not that that's necessarily going to cool you off a bunch, but it's just easier to be able to chew and eat those things and continue to get the calories in, because those carbohydrate calories are always important, whether it's hot or whether it's cold. Sometimes increasing your carbohydrates in your drink, and you do want to watch that because you're looking at, okay, usually carbohydrates have electrolytes in them. So if it's a hot day, probably adding more electrolytes with your carbohydrates is going to be fine. But sometimes having more carbohydrate in your drink is just the easier way to get it down if you're in that part of your event where you just don't feel like chewing food so much. Any other thoughts, Courtney, as far as nutrition?
No, I agree. I think I have no science behind those, just personal experience. Wet
Yeah.
foods are just so much easier to eat in the heat.
Mhm.
I love like applesauce. Sometimes I put some maple syrup in that. And it just like it feels so much easier to eat. Cold noodles. Again, like cold broth, like
Yeah.
just anything that's wet feels better to eat during that time than say like trying to get down some pretzels or even like sometimes candy where you're like if you're dehydrated and you don't have a lot of saliva in your mouth and you're just chewing, like it's it can be just like not fun anymore and discouraging. So yeah, practicing with some foods that bring you joy those times.
I agree. I definitely agree. And using those long runs again to practice in try some different foods out that you think these might be better for me in the heat. That's the time to try them when you're doing that adaptation time when it's hot anyway. And so going into post-run recovery, Courtney, can you share? You have a recipe. I don't know if
Yes.
you share your recipe today, but you can just tell
Yeah.
us about your favorite post-run drink.
Yeah. If we're on a long run, oftentimes we'll use the electrolyte supplements. But when I get home, I have my own like electrolyte personal mix I make. I start with a glass and then I have these ice cubes that I make where I just take different citrus juice. So I love doing grapefruit and lime. Sometimes I'll add some orange or something like that. And I'll make ice cubes out of it. And those are great sources for some of those other electrolytes. So, like magnesium, potassium, calcium, those are resources for those electrolytes. They're not in huge amounts, but again, we're kind of in a position where we're not trying to optimize exactly what we need. We're just trying to do a good job. Um, and so I also usually put in some coconut water if I have it. I usually put in about an eighth of a teaspoon of salt, table salt. I believe that's 250 milligrams. So I will write that down though for when we post it. And then I love some bubbly water. So we have some like mineral water, and I think that has something in it. It has something in it. But it just feels so good because it's just water. It's cold. Um it's got fresh fruit in it and it just feels so good to drink afterwards, but I know I'm getting in some electrolytes, but it feels real compared to like having taken the supplements for a while. So it just feels really good to drink afterwards.
It sounds fabulous. I think I want to go make it after,
Yes.
at least to freeze some juice.
Yeah, I love the frozen juice.
Yeah. It's really important also as you're refueling and especially in your training runs to realize that when it's hot, sometimes we get a little bit behind. So we really need to emphasize refueling well, really hitting those post-workout meals of carbohydrates and protein. And sometimes though we don't feel hungry because we're tired and maybe our stomach's still feeling a little bit funny. So recovery drinks, I like some of the different nutrition companies just put out a recovery drink that's a drink powder. And so I'll do that often. I'll mix it with some ice and some frozen banana and whatever kind of milk that I use and blend that up. And that goes down quick, especially that first immediate 30-minute post run snack slash meal. Cold food is really good. If I'm far away from home, sometimes I'll make up one of those recovery drinks and put it over ice and put it in a thermos and just put it in my car so that I'm drinking that on the way home. So we're just staying up on refueling and recovering as soon as we can.
Yeah, one thing I've been trying recently is chocolate milk. And we just like don't usually have just like chocolate milk powder. So I found that you can take just milk. I put in some maple syrup and I put in some just like not sweet baking cocoa powder in the milk, and it is so good. And it's great because like the milk is going to have a little bit of protein, adding in the maple syrup's going to have some carbs. So it ends up being a really good recovery drink. And then it's nice because it's just things I have on hand.
Yeah, that also sounds delicious. Okay, what am I going to have after the podcast today? All right. How do we get started? If we have a new person that we're coaching, we want to say, let's keep this pretty simple, but also start practicing it as soon as you can. One thing that can be really important is to get to know your sweat rate, get to know yourself. You can start in whatever environment you're training in right now. You can pretty easily do a sweat rate test. You basically weigh yourself without any clothes on before you go out on your run. And then go out, you run for about an hour and come back and then record your weight again. And we can put up there how to do all these calculations. We'll put it in our show notes. But it is pretty interesting to try to figure out, okay, what's my sweat rate? Am I a heavy sweater, moderate sweater, light sweater? That can help us know how much fluids and electrolytes we should be using.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things I would emphasize with a new athlete is, for the most part, we're working with normal people who have normal lives, who are doing running to enjoy it. And so I think it's important to not make it too complicated. There's steps we can take that make you 10% better, and there's steps you can take that make you 1% better. So the 1% better might be going into the heat acclimation, but the 10% better might come from figuring out your food, hydration, and electrolytes. So we're going to start with that. It's best to get to know your body, like you were saying, and how to get the right amount of water and electrolytes. So that's definitely where we would start. And then if it becomes important for that athlete, we might dive into the nitty gritty of having some structured adaptation. But for most people, you probably don't necessarily need to dive into it unless it's something that you are interested in seeking out.
Definitely. Yeah, there's definitely lots of options to there's sweat rate tests that you can do that are much more scientific or even less scientific. Like if you don't want to use a scale, that's great. But I think something. I think we have to start with something. Is so important, and then just keep learning. Just be curious about, okay, how is my body responding? Put it in your workout notes on your workout for all the coaches out there. Yeah, put it in your workout notes. Put it in if you have your own journal, just to keep some notes, because I think those are really helpful things to notice, and then figure out where do we go next. Thank you so much. We put out on social media to see what questions people had about training in the heat, about hydration. So thank you to a couple of friends of ours and longtime Blue Fire friends who wrote back a couple of questions to us. And one of those comes from John, and he asked this: do you drink until you pee clear or not? So are we looking at the color of our urine or not? And is there ever any situation where we want to ration our fluids? What do you think, Courtney?
Yeah, so I would say on a long run, if you're hydrated enough to pee, like, you've won. Like, if you're in the middle of a run, I would not worry about, checking the color of your pee. Also, logistically, like, you might be using some porta potty at a race. Like, logistically, I wouldn't worry about it. I think it would be interesting to, like, in a very long run, identify how often you're going. Because that could tell you some really interesting things about how hydrated you are and what your body's doing. But in general, for during the run, I wouldn't worry about the color. I would highlight that if the color turns to something horrific like red, then you should be worried, and I would stop running immediately, because that goes beyond this and could indicate something like rhabdo. But in general, I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's something to look at in everyday life, though. Sometimes I go into some restrooms in Tucson, and they actually have the color charts. I'm
Really?
like, oh, well,
Just
that's
out?
interesting. Yeah, um, more in like businesses and things like that. But I've
That's
never seen
interesting.
it in a public restroom. But it is kind of an interesting thing to notice as far as how am I doing with hydration? So I think in everyday life, though, it is something to notice. But yeah, I agree. I think it would be pretty. I usually feel like I'm pulling off the trail somewhere, so that's kind of hard to see. Um, but thank you, John. And the other thing too, I would say is, yeah, never. I really would never ration fluids, especially when you're training and racing. I think sticking with that, remembering to keep things in balance. We don't want to overdo it. Courtney, thanks for your example about too much water. We don't want to do that, but yeah, if you can avoid it, try not to ration your
Yeah. I
fluids.
I feel like if rationing indicates something went wrong,
Yeah.
um, it's like you were in a section of a race and you did not carry the correct amount of water.
Hmm.
In that case, I personally would ration it so that way I had some sips of water until I know I could make it to the next aid station.
Hmm.
But I would never intentionally ration water, and I wouldn't use it as a training strategy to stress your body into being better at using water.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And then Ryan also asked this question. He said, I'd love your thoughts on heart rate elevation in heat for a given pace and what to expect for that. And we touched on that, I think, a little bit earlier. We were talking about elevation. And also, we were talking about the adjustments that we have to make in our pacing. It depends on the amount of acclimation that we've been able to do. And then I think for me, like the biggest thing is, yeah, I'm probably going to have an adjustment as far as what my pace looks like when I'm running in the heat and acclimating in the heat.
Yeah, I think there's not really anything I would add. Like, there's not going to be a specific heart rate elevation. Um, if you are always training in the heat, you might get a better sense of what those new paces would be in that temperature. But in general, I don't think you're going to be able to identify the correct pacing. So it's not like if it's 60 degrees, you're going to be running a 9 minute, and it's 100 degrees, you're going to be running a 12 minute.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I think that just goes back to focusing on how it feels in the effort level, because that's going to tell you more about what your body's doing than the specific heart rate that it's at and the pace that's associated with that heart rate.
Yeah, I feel like I have a winter season set of paces, basically living in Tucson, and summer where I can't say I could specifically tell you what each of the paces are, but it's more mentally for me to remember, oh, it's summer. This is a different pace. Summer's a different pace. Winter's a different pace. Just more on the acceptance part for myself. Yeah.
Awesome. So that was our take on heat. Again, just to reiterate, we are not doctors. We read a lot of papers to help prepare ourselves and communicate that information that we learned. And honestly, that's probably one of the biggest things I was excited for with having the podcast in general, was to take this time to really dive deep into these topics, so that way we could share it with you, but also for like Mary and I, having that knowledge is power as a coach, and becoming a better coach by learning this information and sharing it with you guys. So really appreciate you all for listening through our podcast here. And the takeaway is, find balance that is good for your own body, and it takes practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us. We are excited for our next podcast, we are going to have another guest on our next podcast, someone that I have known for her whole life. And that's my daughter, Marley. Marley runs cross country and track and field in college. And so we're just really excited to talk to her about what it's like to be an athlete and in college. And we'll see what she wants to share about growing up having a mom as a coach. She's free to share whatever she wants. So we have our question for each other today as we look towards that next podcast is, what advice would you give to yourself, to your younger self as an athlete? Courtney, what advice would you give?
I would say that you need to find the best version of yourself and not compare the current version of yourself to other people. I think that looking back, like understanding now how training works, how nutrition works, your body is at a certain fitness level, and there's very specific things you can do to increase that fitness level. And taking on somebody else's training plan to try to get to their fitness isn't actually the best way to do that. And so to be comfortable in the space of what is your fitness and what you can do for yourself to get to your goals, and not comparing your own training and fitness level to other people.
I love that. That is so important. So important, Courtney. I would say my advice is actually to my younger self before I found endurance sports. I started doing running, I think in my 20s, but I was also doing a lot of other stupid stuff that I wished I hadn't been doing in my 20s. And so I think, wow, I really would have loved to have participated in triathlon or trail running at that point in my life. So my advice to myself would have been to, especially when I got into college, was to just seek out adventure and seek out community in I just wished I would have had somebody to show me into these spaces that are so fabulous. And so it makes me so grateful when even thinking back to our last conversation with Carly and just helping women of all ages and all backgrounds to get into mountain sports and endurance sports. I just think I would have loved to have done that at that point in my life. So yeah. So I'm excited to talk to Marley and learn more about her life as an athlete in college. We want to invite you to follow along. If you don't already subscribe to us on YouTube or Spotify, please do, so you can catch whenever our next episodes of podcasts come out. Please let us know. You can message us. All our contact information is listed either through social media or through our website. You can get a hold of us if you have any questions about coaching, if you have any questions from the podcast. And we just thank you so much for spending this time here today with us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.